you are entitled to the work, but not its fruits. I mean, it's
Mm.
translated as you are entitled to the labor, but not its outputs. And I think this is kind of back to that idea of like putting yourself into the writing is, you know, you, the, the idea itself is what it's important, not how people respond to it. And people may
Mm.
find value in it or not. You may get credit for it or not. It may perform in the in whatever social
Yeah.
media environment or not. But the only thing that you can really claim ownership of is the work itself. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're talking about here is like,
Mm.
well, how can you harness the time that's available to you, the energy, the attention to make progress on your own ideas?
All right. I'm Laura Forcum, president of the Independence Center and a former marketing professor.
I'm Lauren Hall, professor of political science and author of the Substack, The Radical Moderate's Guide to Life.
This is We Made This Political, a podcast about making politics more about flourishing and less about power.
We talk about living together in families, communities, and as citizens, drawing from our backgrounds in psychology and political science, and as parents. We have a special episode today. It's just Laura and I, and Laura's going to give us a little bit of a rundown on what we're doing, and we hope to have a lot of audience participation today because that's part of the goal. Go ahead, Laura.
So, hello, everybody. Happy almost Thanksgiving. Lauren and I were talking about what we could talk about on the podcast this week. And what we decided to do is kind of talk about our writing process. And we're also curious about other people's writing process. But like the larger idea I had was this is a time of year when there's a lot of kind of busy work where your brain is free, but your hands are busy. So I think about like driving time, washing dishes time, chopping onions time, all of those things. And for me, this can be really productive ideation time and help me make progress on writing, but it there's a prescription for it. And it's really interesting because I think I stumbled into this, but I'm not the only one to notice this. And like since I came up with this, I've seen it reinforced in other places. And so the idea is that what you need to do is write things down to allow your unconscious mind to work on them. And Lauren, I don't know if you've ever had this process like writing an academic paper where like I'll come to a place where like the theoretical logic is not clear or like there's a piece in the logical chain that I can't connect with research, right? Like with existing literature. And so I'll be thinking about it and like the answer will come, but I will wake up with it or it will come to me while I'm taking a shower or on a walk.
Yep.
And I think that this is a really incredible process. And I try to be more deliberate about taking advantage of it.
Yeah. So I really love Cal Newport's work. He's the author of Deep Work, and I need to read his book, A World Without Email, because right now you and I were talking like the other day about just how email is destroying our brains.
Yes.
But anyway, in Deep Work, he actually talks about the fact that he does writing in the morning and then he goes for a walk, like and he doesn't have a this was hard for me because I love podcasts and like I do tend to sort of distract myself, but he doesn't listen to podcasts. It's just his time to sort of like let his mind do what it's going to do. And very often he will have these like insights on his walk. And you'll hear that from other people that like, the shower one is a really common one too. Right. Another funny one I read was Quentin Tarantino apparently has like his workflow involves floating in his pool for like, I mean, of course, if you're Quentin Tarantino, it sounds amazing, but he like does really intensive writing in the morning and then he floats in his pool for like an hour or 2 hours. And without any like distractions, and then comes back and like fixes stuff that he figured out. But like he's not like trying to think about stuff. And this is like to your point, right? He's just like freeing his brain from the task in order to like let it kind of put pieces together behind the scenes. So I love this. And I love your example of like chopping onions. Like there's all these manual tasks that we do this time of year that like we actually could be kind of letting our brain do more in the background.
Yeah, I think especially if you have a kind of like a creative project or something that is outside of your work responsibilities, so there's no real urgency in making progress on it. And, for me, I'm sort of looking for chunks of time. Like, where could I make some progress on something that's personally important, but maybe not directly related to my role in my regular job? Um, and, I think the thing that's really cool, I love the Quentin Tarantino example. Um, the idea that like your brain can find patterns or do work outside of conscious direction is really important, and I think incredible if you haven't experienced it. But the thing, I think like the thing that all of these guys are touching on, so John Cleese said this, Ernest Hemingway said this. I think I also read it. If you haven't read Stephen Pressfield's books, The War of Art,
Oh
and
yeah.
Nobody Wants to Read Your Bullshit. These are also, I think it's in there too. These are great works about like how you get going and the felt experience of it. But what they all have in common is like you have to get the problem down somewhere as part of that process, right? Like your brain is not gonna like without any guide rails do this work. You have to give it a channel to work down. And for a lot of people, that's writing. I don't know what it looks like if you're a painter or a musician. I'd be really curious if we have anybody listening. Like, how does that change in different mediums?
Yeah.
But also, big plug for Nobody Wants to Read Your Bullshit and The War of Art, because The War of Art talks a lot about resistance to work. And he really like traces what that feels like and what it looks like and how he fights against it. And I think it's helpful to like give that feeling a name of like, no, you don't need to do this. No, you can't make progress.
Yeah. I did faculty coaching for like 8 years or something, and one of the things that we really focused with faculty on was resistance, because faculty, especially pre-tenure faculty, your tenure case is entirely decided by your research. Nobody cares about your teaching. Nobody cares about your service. And yet your teaching and your service have built-in accountability and your research doesn't. And so what often happens is that faculty get caught up in, oh, well, I'll write after I answer these like 3 urgent student emails, or I'll write after this committee meeting or whatever. And it always comes last. But then when they sit down, they struggle with this resistance, right? This like call to do anything other than what they should be doing, right? And one of the metaphors that we use with our participants is to think about, instead of like and a lot of it just depends on like the metaphor that you find useful, but in this case, it's not about shutting down resistance. It's not about pretending that it's not happening. It's not like just gritting your teeth and like battling through it, although that's kind of part of it. But we actually talk about dancing with your resistance, where you sort of you acknowledge it and you say, hey, you're here. Like, here you are. You're here, right? And then you can kind of think about ways to like sort of like move the resistance into like helpful directions. And so sometimes that's like some people respond really well to external motivators. So I used to use Cave Day a lot, which was like you would join a Zoom with like 20 other people who are all doing deep work at a specific time. And just for me, like being in a group, even on Zoom, was like enough to be like, okay, this is my writing.
This
time.
is what we're doing.
This is what we're doing, right? And you set an intention in the chat, so like it's clear what you're supposed to be doing. But for other people, like Write or Die, I don't know if you remember that website where like if you stop writing, it starts deleting what you wrote.
That's really cool. No, I've never heard of that. Oh my God.
Write or Die. I don't know if it's still around, but it was amazing. So like it was great for just like getting words on the page, like
Mhm.
which is really what a lot of people struggle with. It's just that
Mhm.
initial getting words on the page. And lately, the big resistance buster I've found is these voice memos, which we could talk about a little
Mhm.
bit more. But for me, um, I'm more comfortable sounding stupid out loud than I am on paper. Like there's something about like,
Interesting.
and part of it's that like I can sort of delete the voice memo if it's just garbage, which sometimes it is, but I feel weird about deleting like a whole page of writing, you know? Um, so I think, for everyone, it's about finding what specific form of resistance yours is taking. Like for some people, it's like, I need to clean my office before I write,
Mhm.
or I only have an half an hour. I really need 3 hours to like get
Mhm.
anything done. Like, so everyone has their own story that helps feed their resistance. Um, but I do think you're absolutely right that like naming it is absolutely crucial, and
Mhm.
then figuring out how you work around it.
Mhm.
Um, I also think normalizing it's really important. Like I used to, before I started coaching, I think a really standard narrative for faculty is like, why am I such a screw up? Like
Mhm.
I'm the only person experiencing this. Like, of course I'm the only one who like can't get their shit done. But that's not true. Like everybody does this, right? It's human nature.
Mhm.
So I think normalizing it too can really help. Like it's just like this is not something to be ashamed of. You just like
Mhm.
you're a human being and your brain doesn't want to like do hard stuff. So let's figure out a way to like
Well,
loosen the
and
wheels, you know?
I think also like if you're writing for academic journal submissions, that part of that resistance is trying to keep you safe, right? Because that
Yes.
review process can be really brutal. I don't know. Maybe if you have, I don't know, I'm envisioning like reporters with some like hard-nosed editor who gives them a really hard time. I don't think the kind of feedback you get in the review process is common, right? And so like sometimes it's really biting. Sometimes it's really nasty. It's really disheartening. Um, I've heard from people in psychology that it can be personal, and I never experienced that in marketing, but that it would be a personal attack. And also it's just really disheartening to work on a paper, and the timeline's crazy, right? So put 2 years into a paper and get feedback back where it's very clear that people have not engaged with the ideas you're sharing.
Yeah.
I once got a review back that said, it's almost as if you're saying, and then they went on to describe the exact hypothesis of the paper and what we'd showed with evidence. And
And you're like,
I was just like, oh my God, like,
that
how do
hurts
I,
sometimes. Yeah.
that's exactly what we were saying. Like, how did that get missed?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that resistance has a legitimate role.
Yep.
And yeah, pretending like it's not real or it's not founded is
Hmm.
probably not a helpful way to combat it.
Yeah. And I'll just say too, so I've gotten really good at accepting negative feedback, but I still, I have two academic monographs. I have lots of articles, right? So I've gotten rejected a lot along the way. But it made me laugh when you were discussing that because one task that I've totally been putting off, um, is querying agents. So I've queried now like 20 or so, maybe 25, maybe even
Mhm.
30 like agents at this point, and most don't respond at all. And then,
Mhm.
and then a couple will send. They're always polite. Agents are always polite, but it's always like, this isn't the right fit for me right now, or like this
Mhm.
isn't something like the one that I find like the most hurtful is like, this isn't something we're going to represent. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, it's like sort of like it's like weirdly like, but it's like polite, so it's not
Mhm.
rude. Um, but I have like a specific agent who I have been intending to query now for like the last 2 weeks. And I just cannot sit down. And
Mhm.
there's always some reason, right? Like I need to fix my bio, or there's something like really specific that needs to get done, or like my desk is kind of messy. Um, so even people who have been doing this for 20 odd years, who have like had lots of experience with rejection, who have persevered through rejection. I've had books published, in the academic space. The general audience space is much different. But so yeah, we all do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes it sneaks past you. Like I
Oh,
mentioned why I was
absolutely.
struggling with resistance, but I probably was minimizing how much it was affecting me. But obviously the agent can't reject me if I don't submit to her, but she also
Mhm.
she can't accept me either. So this is where you shoot yourself in the
Mhm.
foot, right?
Absolutely. Um, Yeah, I think, and so like this is really not a problem. Our point in talking about this is not to say this only applies to you if you're an academic, but it's sort of to say like these are problems I think are universal. If anybody has experience with how they fight against the resistance, we would love to hear it. Um, but one of the things I've noticed about the newsletter writing that I do is it's gotten easier. But earlier on, what I was quite aware of is that like I'd internalize the voices of the reviewers that I get. We have a joke in academia that reviewer two is like the most, right? Like that spot, because
The
reviews
big
are
jerk.
anonymous. Reviewer two is always a jerk. That is the hardest review you will have. It may be irrational. It may be something that nobody can do. Nobody can fix this with a study. Nobody, like it's an unsolvable problem. But reviewer two is impossible. And so I talk about like I had really internalized reviewer two's voice. And when I was writing in the newsletter or writing my newsletter, what I would always be hearing in my own head was the voice of some reviewer too saying, you can't say that, you can't support that, you haven't proven that. Like, why do you get to say that? And what I realized, or what I have realized after a couple of years of doing this now, is that there is no reviewer two. Nobody comes to tell me that I shouldn't be saying these things. And like maybe they will if I when I start to have more impact. But right now, there is
Yeah.
no reviewer two. There's nobody
Mhm.
telling me that I shouldn't be saying the things I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I like if I could tell anything to the people who listen to the podcast, it would be like I know you're expecting critique for your ideas, but like I think you will see more upside than downside from working on them and promoting them and sharing them.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think, the negative stuff I get from my general audience writing is easier to dismiss than and it doesn't mean I don't read it. And it doesn't mean that I don't like engage with the criticisms because I do think that's really important. But it often like, I had a piece in Real Clear Politics like last year sometime and it was clear that like all of the comments were just going to be ad hominem, like just attacks. And so I had my husband, I was like, hey, scan the comments and just see if any of them are useful.
Mhm.
And he came back and he was like, no, don't. Just don't read, just don't
them.
read the comments, and I was like, okay, good. Like I'm freed from like thinking that
Mhm.
I'm free from like FOMO or like I don't have to worry about
Mhm.
like and then in the piece on Trump that I had that went like sort of semi-viral that's kind of getting picked up again this week for some weird algorithmic reason. Um there's a lot of negative, like some guy called me out he called my piece moronic this week. But like, it's easy for me to like be like, that's not a real criticism. Like,
Right.
like you can think that this argument's moronic, but lots of people in the comments didn't. And,
Mhm.
and ultimately, either make a criticism that's meaningful
Mhm.
or I don't
No,
have
I'm
to
not gonna
engage with
listen.
you.
Yeah.
So ultimately I didn't. But I do think for me at least, I think the academic critiques are harder because they're much more I think we are trained to, I mean, we have to engage with them, first of
Right.
all, professionally. But then also, these are fellow PhDs. And I think I often like some of the negative feelings I have after really brutal reviews is like, these are people with PhDs and they're behaving like this. Like, like some of them are the ones that are like personal or inappropriate. You're like, wow, you're a faculty member
Yeah.
and you're behaving a like really
Like a
I was
jerk.
gonna say, but
Yeah.
yeah, like a jerk. So I think that like there's like this other like element of like, wow, this is like kind of broken. But anyway, um, so what are you thinking this week for um first of all, yeah, like are there specific projects you're working on? How are you thinking about them? And then are you anticipating resistance? What form that might take? And then how you might move beyond it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about the piece that I'm hoping to make some progress on while I have a little bit of breathing room. So I'm giving myself the week off from newsletter writing because usually I'd publish on Thursday, but that's Thanksgiving. And I think a lot of people will be either busy or writing Thanksgiving things. So taking this week off, and I'm planning to use that space to write something that I am like massively struggling with saying correctly. But kind of what it boils down to is this idea that yourself is a resource. So that's the first sentence I've written down as I start to get my brain going. The self is a resource. We have a lot of different research in social psychology, in consumer psychology that talks about all the ways in which we treat the self as a resource. And so you can think of it as being sort of like restorative. Um, it's sort of like, if you believe in a soul, I think that's aligned to the idea of a self. But even if you aren't religious, right, it's a sort of like core set of who you fundamentally are. And tapping into that can refresh you when you feel depleted from, say, trying to make yourself do something hard. When you have poured out effort into other places, coming back to the self is also restorative. It's a source of insight and wisdom, right? And like depending on what traditions you follow, like there are different ways of talking about that. And so what I think is really interesting is that the like this is a renewable resource in some sense, right? But then at the same time, we have a lot of calls like telling us to disregard it. And I think about this with like podcast culture, right? Or like even internet culture and like Substack, right? Is that like we should take all of this time and instead of attending to ourselves, we should devote that time to attending to what somebody else is saying. And so the other piece that I have to figure out how to explain this and how to weave this in is I think you need some jealousy for yourself. And this is the piece that I don't know quite how I want to say it, but you need this feeling of when yourself has been encroached on too much or when there's not space for it. Right. And so I thought about this with a bunch of different guests we've had. Lenore Skenazy was one of the most recent ones, but talking about like this idea that the experts are always outside of us. And, like for moms, right? Think about this, like think about all the parenting advice you get as a mom. And at the end of the day, you spend more time with your child than anybody else does. So how much can they really know? And I think we get all these pressures to like, no, ignore your intuition, ignore what is inside you and the guidance inside of you and replace it with something external. And so what I'm trying to like weave together in this very nebulous piece is like, no, that self is really important. We know it through research. We know it through esoteric traditions, faith traditions. And we're being told to ignore it. And like, how do we have a feeling of jealousy around it? I need a better word than jealousy, I think. How do you cultivate it and protect it?
Yeah. I don't know what I'll work on that. This reminds me though of like there's a constant battle within the writing community, both academic writing and other kinds of writing, about whether you have to read or write first. Like and I think the academic myth is often like you have to read every single thing in your in your area before you could ever be competent to comment on this. And then I started to hear the reverse of that. And I think this is coming more recently, but I think there's been a little bit of an attitude change, or at least like a counter narrative, which is, you want to make sure that like you're not just like you want to make sure that the paper hasn't already been written. That's important, right? Like you want to make sure that you're contribute to the conversation, right? And you also need to make sure that you're familiar enough with like the conversation to know what like the primary points are, right? Like what are the issues that people are thinking about in your field? But I think we really and I've noticed this too, and you see this as a major source of resistance among grad students and also tenure track folks, which is, well, I need to keep reading. I haven't read it to start writing. But writing itself is an act of thinking. And I think we often sort of, I think by creating these gates or these like gatekeeping kinds of things where we're like, oh, no, you can't you can't comment on this unless you've had
Yes.
X numbers of experiences and read the X numbers of books on this topic and X, Y, or Z. And I think your point is so important, which is that there's this real balance, which is all of us are unique individuals and we bring a vision and a voice and an experience to whatever this topic is that no one else has. Now we have to have the courage to like really bring forward whatever unique perspective we're bringing, right? Like we can't, and by courage, I mean, like, I think it's, and I'll say that I was very worried about when I first started my Substack, and it wasn't worried about like getting bad comments or anything. It was like this weird, I think it was what you're pointing to, which is this like, am I competent to make these arguments?
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, yeah. And like, if I do say it, then I need citations or like I need to link to something. And then I started looking at like the best opinion writers and like people that I really respect and like people, writers, even in genres that I'm not like that into. But like, it's not like Stephen King was like, well, I can only say things if other people like have already said them. Like that.
Right.
The whole point is that like he has a crazy brain and he was able to like bring his crazy brain to the playground in this really unique way and run with it. He has a really great book on writing too, actually, that folks should check out. Yeah, it's called Stephen King on Writing. I'm looking at it right now. But I think like he takes that other narrative, which is like, hey, writing and writing well and writing stuff that people want to read is ultimately about self-trust. It's about you and your own sort of unique perspective and capacity. And until you can do that, until you get out of that, like asking permission framework, you're not going to be a good writer. Like you'll be an okay writer, but you're not going to, because you're not going to be authentic. You're not going to be someone that people are like, hey, this person has something unique to say about the world. You're just going to be sort of regurgitating stuff that other people have said. And that is, I mean, unfortunately, that's like a lot of academic writing, but I've struggled with this for a long time, right? The question of like how much, and even in the Substack, the question of like, and you and I have talked about this a lot, like, we're supposed to be reading other people's stuff and commenting on it and posting on notes and doing all this other stuff to engage other people. But we're both moms. We have full-time jobs. We, like this is not, we can't give and give and give to other people. And so if writing is something that we do for ourselves, at least some writing projects, then yeah, we shouldn't have to ask for permission, right? Like we should just do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting what you're pointing to a little bit earlier, which is that sense of like, I'm not allowed to say this yet is pervasive, even among people who are ostensibly experts. Right. So if you think, well, can I really write anything about the psychology of, being a divergent thinker or, whatever it is that you're interested in, you should know that the people who are scholars who are publishing research about topics like being a divergent thinker, right? Like even they are asking themselves, have I done enough to be able to talk about this subject?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's a widespread tendency and it exists across every level of expert and thinker. And I think the question you have to ask yourself is, am I being true to what my vision is? And am I being authentic? Not have I accounted for every possible argument, counter argument, disagreement in this writing? Because that too, when I first started writing the newsletter, I would cite the actual papers that I was using as a basis for a claim. I would include a citation with a link. And then God, nobody ever clicks these. Nobody cares. I'll just cite like Wikipedia articles that summarize the general area of research. Nobody clicks those either. So I've kind of gradually abandoned that practice. And if somebody comes back to me and says, hey, but what about this? Like I'll answer in the comments. But when it's in the writing, it's defensive. It reads as defensive.
Yeah.
Right. And people kind of like lose the argument of what you're trying to say in your efforts to prove to them that you're allowed to say it.
but they're reading you. They've
Yeah.
already agreed you get to say it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and so yeah, if you look back at my Substacks from like 4 years ago, they're linked, like every other word is hyperlinked because it was like this like very defensive. And now I almost never use hyperlinks. And a lot of it was like, hey, I'm trying to get my ideas out there. If you, to your point, right? If you want to, if you have a different perspective, bring it to the comments. I would love to hear, I would, and I'm always happy to do follow-ups. I correct myself all the time. But this is not a peer-reviewed paper. Like I do not have to do this like defensive citation stuff all the time. The other thing too is that I think people often confuse like being willing to go outside of our comfort zone or like our sort of like expert zone, like whatever, like asking for permission for a kind of hubris. And I think, the best writers are the ones who say, hey, like, here's some provisional thoughts. Like, here's what I'm thinking right now. It might change, right? Someone else might correct me. We might have better data later, but like for now, here's what I'm going to throw out there to the world. And that's ultimately like how people get better at like not just the writer, but the readers too. Like it invites the readers into a conversation. Whereas if I'm just like sending out like a massively hyperlinked article and it's just like, this is the authoritative
Wall of sight.
like Substack post on whatever it is, right? People are like, oh, okay. Right. But then I'm not inviting readers into like a critical kind of conversation about whatever topic it is. And the stuff that you and I talk about, it's always up for debate, right? Like, I mean, there's better evidence and there's worse evidence, right? Like we know that, but I would love to hear people who've had like different experiences or who just think I'm wrong. Like, great, let's talk about it. So yeah, I think there's been like I've managed to sort of free myself, and I liked your way of thinking about like how do we, and it's not selfishness, right? I think you're right. It's protectiveness. Like how do we protect ourselves in this in the writing process and make sure that we are in fact being authentic and sort of and not just constantly having to respond to other people. I guess that's the tough point.
Well, it reminds me of the conversation we had with Kurt Gray most recently, right? Where one of the things we touched on is that like our self gets brought into these conflicts we're having with people, whether it's like family members at the holidays or even parenting, right? And you'll just be like, oh my God, leave me alone, right? Like you have asked too much of me. I am overwhelmed. And Kurt's point, I think, and yours too, was actually yourself is not a thing that needs protecting. It's actually like really robust. And we spend a lot of time protecting myself, but that's the other piece of what I'm trying to get through in this newsletter is that like yourself is very malleable. It's like the most enduring piece of you. We spend a lot of time protecting it, but we don't need to. But what we do need to do is figure out how to keep space for it. We're protecting it in the wrong way. We have an inclination to protect it in a way that it doesn't need to be protected. And we fail to make space for it in a a way that it could be really valuable to us.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking, I remembered, by the way, everyone, the edited podcast with Kurt dropped yesterday. And it's great. It's such a fun episode. So it's great for if you have questions about how to handle things at Thanksgiving, because there will be a lot of tough conversations at Thanksgiving. But one of the things that he emphasized is this sort of Buddhist kind of attitude, right? To like, of just like flexibility, right? Like being able to kind of flex. And the Buddhist conception of self is that there is like no such thing, right? Like the self is like sort of the last story we tell ourselves about like what things that we're attached to, right? And the self is really just not a thing at all. But this reminded me, like, in terms of like how, like, the sort of Buddhist approach to things like resistance or the Buddhist approach to like writing, right, would be very similar to the approach that Kurt was pointing out for like conflict at family dinner, right? Like, this is ultimately not about me, right? Like, you let it sort of wash over you and you just let it go, right? And so with resistance, right, you don't have to like wear a hair shirt because you're so weak. You don't have to like fight it tooth and nail. You can just say like, okay, this is happening to me right now. I'm going to like move through it, but I don't have to hold on to it. I don't have to have any attachment to it. I don't have to do anything with it. Right? I can just say like, this is what my brain is doing. I'm going to move my brain in a different direction, but I don't have to like attach any emotional baggage to it. Right. And so to a certain degree, like the kind of stuff that we're talking about with writing really is sort of like breaking free, um, to be able to say like, I'm putting these words out there and then letting go, like if people like them, they like them. If they don't, they don't. And this is something I think this is like a slightly different topic, but like, this is something I think you and I both struggle with because right now the algorithm is set up in such a way that you do have to sort of like perform for others in order to get noticed. And that's not my style. It's not your style. It's very, it feels really it feels gross on the one hand. And then it also feels, um, deeply frustrating because we have other stuff that we should be doing that is self-oriented, that's not posting constantly on, every social media platform and like everything that we're supposed to be doing, right? Supposed to. But so there is that tension, right? Which is that like you do have to play the game if you want people to find your work, but you have to be careful about how you play the game because it can kind of consume you. So like I feel this constant sort of tension of trying to make sure that I'm um not getting sucked into it, but also still doing enough that people can find my stuff. So I don't know if it's working, but the balance.
One of the things you said reminded me of a quote that is in The Art of War, I'm pretty sure. But it comes from the Bhagavad Gita, and it is, you are entitled to the work, but not its fruits. And it's translated as you are entitled to the labor, but not its outputs. And I think this is kind of back to that idea of like putting yourself into the writing is, you know, you, the, the idea itself is what it's important, not how people respond to it. And people may find value in it or not. You may get credit for it or not. It may perform in the in whatever social media environment or not. But the only thing that you can really claim ownership of is the work itself. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here is like, well, how can you harness the time that's available to you, the energy, the attention to make progress on your own ideas?
Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me too that there's a lot of commentary about process versus outcome oriented goals. And, and so if your goal is to have like, and outcome oriented goals can be helpful in some narrow contexts, but if you only have outcome oriented goals, and by that I mean like I'll have 2,000 subscribers by March or something like that. You forget that the only way that you're going to get there is by the process, right? And so what is the process? Well, the process is you have to post once a week. You have to commit to doing the work and doing the work in a meaningful way. And ultimately, if I end up 5 years down the road and I don't have a book deal and the Substack is sort of still where it is today, I've done an enormous amount of thinking and writing about something that I care about. So like, I haven't lost anything. In fact, I've gained a lot, but I have to, I think it's important to focus on that process piece because absolutely no one is guaranteed. Like no one's guaranteed an agent. No one's guaranteed bestseller status. Like no one's guaranteed anything. There's a lot of writers who do really amazing work who are writing every day and they will never be bestsellers, right?
They're toiling in obscurity, so many artists, right? Writers, artists.
Good artists.
Oh, important.
Fallacy that like, if you're, if you're important enough or you're doing good enough work, you'll be discovered. And that's just not true, right? So, so the work has to be important enough for you to do on its own without any external accolades. And if it's not, then that's a signal, right? Like then other stuff is more important to you and you should be doing that instead. It's not like, I think we put a lot of normative weight on this stuff where like, if you find that if I find out in a year that I'm just not getting the value out of writing the Substack as I was like, walk away, I'll garden instead or, but I think it's really important that we like find stuff that we value and then we let go of whatever weird expectations or, normative weight we have on that other stuff. Which again, it's not easy. I'm not saying I'm like amazing at it, but I do think it's been kind of eye-opening just like watching, working on this project for as long as I have. So anyway, yeah. What's your writing project that you're going to move forward over this long weekend? Well, I have two things. One is I have an academic article that's due. So I have a deadline, which is always useful. So I need to do that. It's actually it's an article on the family. So my first book was on the political theory of the family, and so this is kind of an extension of that. It's for an edited volume. So that's actually been fun because it links to some themes that we've been playing with. So like the Lenore episode, Free Range Kids. She and I mentioned Peter Gray's work. He's a psychologist, developmental psychologist, who does this wonderful work on play. And then there's another Mark Beckett. I'll find his name. He co-wrote a book called Wild Justice. And it's about, he's a canid, so he studies coyotes. But he has really interesting work on the way that social hunting species. So his argument, which I actually think is quite persuasive in a lot of ways, his argument is that we often think about the great apes as being our closest sort of relatives behaviorally. But he says, actually, we have much more in common with social hunting species like wolves and coyotes. Because social hunting species do things much differently than for example, the great apes do. So none of the great apes do any kind of really collaborative hunting together. There are like very small exceptions to that, but none of the chimpanzees don't do a lot of cooperative hunting. So he instead looks at coyotes. And so he and this philosopher wrote this book together, Wild Justice. It's just wonderful. And it looks at like sort of the foundations of human morality through this, the sort of way that these social hunting animals sort of do things, but a big component of that is play. So if you look at part of the reason that like it was so easy for dogs to be domesticated is that they're so similar to humans, and we respond to very similar incentives. And a lot of the play that you see with puppies is very similar to the play that you see with human kids. And so his argument is that the play that we do when we're little really sets us up for this internal sense of justice. And Peter Gray stuff. So that will be on the family sort of, and the role that the family plays in these broader governance things that we've been talking about. But the other one that I've been thinking about, and this is a much more personal one, and I'm not sure how the Substack world will engage, so we'll see. But I was thinking about it the other day that I have 3 daughters, as you know, and my oldest is 13, and so she's moving into this really big space. My last book was on birth and death, and I spent a lot of time thinking about death. And my sister is a palliative care nurse practitioner, so I hear a lot about death. And I also am just aware that, nobody's given the time that nobody's guaranteed the amount of time that they want. And so I was thinking the other day about death, as you do. And I was like, well, I'm doing all this public writing for other people. Like, I mean, it's for me, right? But it's not, but I would be really sad if like I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I didn't write some things for my daughters, And so I was thinking about a series of posts, and just when I have something I want to say, like not, it won't be like a forced regular thing, but just a series of posts titled something like Letters to My Daughters. And it's just like stuff that I want them to think about, like as they move into the world, as they grow into adulthood. I know I don't know if it's because I was young when I went into, I was a year younger than everyone in my grade, not for any like good reason, which I just started kindergarten early because I had like a December birthday. But, and I often felt really like detached and a little confused by like social stuff that was going on. Like I was always like, I don't really get like what people are doing. And it just would have been like really nice to have like someone share similar, like, I think the this gets better message is really important. Obviously, like, middle school is like peak awfulness of your life, and then everything does get better from middle school. But anyway, but there's a lot of like broader, like philosophic questions I want to like think through, like with them in mind, as young women entering a really complex kind of future.
Mhm.
So I'm going to try to map out. I have a couple of those already mapped out. I'm going to try to think about whether there's like other topics I want to think about with them, and like what I would like to kind of have these more, so in that case, it's sort of about like leaving artifacts behind, and having
Okay.
something for my kids, having writing that they, uh, that engages with them directly. So
Mhm.
yeah.
That sounds heavy. That sounds like there will be ugly crying involved in in writing and probably reading it too.
There probably will be. I don't know if you've read, if you don't want to ugly cry today, do not read Tatiana
Oh,
Schlossenberg.
Kennedy Schloss.
Kennedy Schloss.
Yeah.
I can never remember if there's an N in there. Um, and yeah, she has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was diagnosed either right before her daughter was born or as her daughter was born. Which I just can't. So she has two little tiny kids who will not remember her. And I like that is just heartbreaking to me, like as a mom, and her New Yorker article was like deeply personal, but also political. Like she was heavily critical of her uncle, and RFK Jr. and the work that he's doing to cut off clinical trials and stuff like that. So anyway, if you don't want to ugly cry, do not read that today. But it is something that if you're thinking about like things to be grateful for, I think that there's a lot of lessons about gratitude in the piece, gratitude that like we have ways to keep people alive that we didn't have before, but also gratitude that, those of us who are still here. And she's obviously still here, but
Yeah.
those of us without like a clear expiration date have a lot to be grateful for, and even the opportunity to just spend Thanksgiving with our families, however complicated that is.
Yes.
So anyway, all that's to say, I would like to do more, because I've just spent like a lot of time thinking about death. And it sounds like a bummer, but I've actually like gotten really into the memento mori movement. I don't know if you've like it's there's a Catholic element to it, but it's also this broader kind of stoic thing. But it's the basic piece of it is that like by thinking about your death, you actually free yourself from the kinds of stuff that we've talked about, right? Like if you think about like the fact that you have there's a great book, 4,000 Weeks, that basically says like, hey, like we all have an expiration date. Like we don't know when it's going to be, but like, probably max you have about 4,000 weeks. So do you have time to sit around asking people for permission? Do you have time sitting around wondering like how your words are going to land, or like, is this the right thing to say at the right time? No, you don't actually, because who knows? Like just get it out there, get it, and so that I think is a nice way of like a sort of positive way of thinking about our sort of like finite space. It also gives me an excuse to like I have lots of like, oh my gosh, little like attractive I pick these up in like random places. I think this one I want to say this one was Ecuador.
Wow.
And then I have another little one from New Mexico. I just have like little skulls all over my options. Not in like a goth way, just in a sort of cheerful way. Like, hey,
In a cheerful way, in a constructive way. I had no idea, Lauren.
yeah, lots of little skulls everywhere.
Well, that actually, there's psychology research about how constraint increases creativity. And I think we have this idea that artists are totally free and they have to be totally free. Exactly.
Ultimate
To
constraint,
share their
that is.
vision. Death is the ultimate constraint, but other types of constraint too. Like when I have a 9 to 5, and if I want to write a book, I'm going to have to find 2 hours a week, or 2 hours every day for 6 months to write this book. That's something I'm struggling with right now. I have a book idea that I really want to develop, and I also have the newsletter, right? I also have this podcast. I also have a job and kids. So those constraints can be helpful because they do the thing that I think the 4,000 Weeks is also doing for people, which is saying there are limits and you're going to have to work within them. And yeah, when you're a kid, you think that time is unlimited and that you're invincible. Um, and,
Mhm.
you know, there's some downsides to that feeling, right?
Yep.
Because it means there's not a lot of pressure to
Mhm.
accomplish things or to figure out what do you need to give up that's not serving you, that's standing in the way of your ideas reaching a broader audience, or even you profiting from your ideas in an
Yep.
intellectual sense, right?
Yep.
Because when there's no space for you, for yourself, with apologies to Buddhists, then you can't, right? Like, then there's no way to develop those ideas.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Um, there was something I was going to say. By the way, everyone who's here, if you have ideas, throw them into the chat. We would love to hear what you're working on. Maybe not this week, but if you have time over like the broader holiday season. Um, Part of what Laura and I were this has gone in a million other great directions here. But part of what we were thinking is thinking about ways to use the sort of busy work as an opportunity to spin ideas into bigger things. One thing I've been playing with a lot that I just wanted to mention is voice memos. So I've been using my commute or when I'm like organizing kids' clothes in the basement, because all I'm doing
Mhm.
is like folding stuff and putting them into bins or whatever. Um, those are great times to like throw in my AirPods and just talk things out.
Mhm.
My good friend Sarah calls this rubber ducking, and you can actually do it like you can pin a rubber duck like on top of your computer screen and talk at it. Because like what we're doing right now is obviously like we're talking through our ideas. Like we didn't have a script, we weren't like coming at this with a specific kind of conclusion. But when you talk things out with people, ideas develop. But
Mhm.
we don't always have like a captive audience like with us, and so um, the rubber duck approach is just like choose like find a rubber duck and like put it and talk to it. So for me, I've been just using voice memos and that's been great. And then I take Claude AI
Mhm.
and take the voice and have it clean up the voice memo. And then I have a rough draft that I can work off of. But that has been amazing for avoiding blank page syndrome, right? Where like I
Mhm.
sit down and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot have to throw that laundry in, right? Like, or whatever other form of resistance I come up with. So having a draft to work off of is like very helpful
Yeah.
for me. Um, and the other thing that I've done, I did this while I was cleaning the porch this fall, as I started talking through this concept of deep pluralism, which I think might be my next book project. I'm not sure. Says the woman who still has not gotten an agent for the first
The
project,
first
but
one.
yeah, the first popular book. So, but I just sort of like threw some ideas out there, threw a bunch of examples into the hopper, and then had Claude. I was like, write up, like take this voice memo and draft an outline for a longer book proposal, and then tell me where you see gaps.
Mhm.
And it was great. So, like, if you treat Claude like a sort of or ChatGPT, Claude is better for writers than ChatGPT is, but if you can use AI not to generate content, but to vet ideas or help you organize your
Mhm.
thoughts, I think it's a really wonderful tool. And it's great for those of us who like if I'm stuck in the basement for 2 hours on a Saturday organizing kids' clothes, I'm not going to drag my husband down there just so he can listen to me talk. Like it's
Mhm.
actually much better to like just do it,
Mhm.
do it on my own. So I don't know. Do you have any other like what workflows are you thinking about right now?
So I definitely I don't use voice memos, although I guess I could. I use talk to text on my phone and like a note. And when I'm out on a walk or when I'm driving, I will talk through the idea that I have been thinking about. And then, like you said, throw it into ChatGPT and ask it to like organize the ideas, put them into an outline, or make a more logical flow, find gaps, exactly what you talked about. Something a little bit surprising, maybe in my work process, is that often I'll find that an idea is coming up in multiple different contexts. So I kind of joke that, like, when I have texted or talked to the third person in a week about the same idea, that becomes the newsletter. And every time I'm talking about it, it's getting a little bit more refined and it's very top of mind. And I can also use the feedback I'm getting from the other person to kind of refine it into a newsletter.
Hmm.
Um, or the other thing that I feel like we're very fortunate to have is the podcast guests, right? Because things
Yeah.
that they say will jibe with a topic I've been writing about or talking to other people about. And so I can have their feedback, or I can say, like, this is how I'm thinking about it. Does it fit with your model? And so that's been really productive for me. Like, often when we're having those conversations, I'm making notes because I hear things that are sources or papers or something, other work that can help kind of bolster the argument that I've been trying to make. So that's become
Yeah.
an important part of my process.
No, I totally agree. I was talking to a mentor of mine who I've known since I was in grad school, and he asked how the podcast was going, and he's always super suspicious of like anything that takes you away from like writing. But I pointed out to him, I was like, it's been really generative. Like it has, I think the range of people that we've had on the podcast and like the different ideas that they're bringing to the table, um, the fact that they're all coming from different fields and different backgrounds, but like we all kind of end up thinking about similar kinds of things, but in totally different ways. So that has been amazing. And there are times that I'll get off the podcast and like put my earbuds back in and then go for a walk to think through something that we've talked about. And I actually need to get better at that. Is something I'm not very good at, is idea capture. I do it really well for like voice memos in the moment, like if I have something that I'm doing, but like I'm not very good at taking my notes and then intentionally doing stuff with them later. Like that is something that's harder for me. So like if I have ideas, sometimes I do have like a text thread to myself that I'll send ideas or news articles that are interesting. So that's a decent idea capture method, but it's not perfect because you have to do it to capture the ideas in the first place.
I think about, somebody said, and I cannot find this anywhere now. I have no idea where I read this, but it was really helpful, and ChatGPT has not been able to help me locate it. Some writer was talking about how what you're basically doing is like a chef, and you have these big stew pots on your stove, and you're just constantly throwing stuff in there. And she said something like, or he, I don't know, I think it's a woman, when it's done, you bring it forward and you start dishing it out. Right. And so I think some of what we've been talking about today is the process of like collecting that stuff, filling up the pot, letting it ferment, right? Or cook, whatever. That's your brain's unconscious, non-conscious work on the question, and then being able to serve from it. My stew pots are Google Docs. I will start a new one and put some notes there. And so it's good because it gets it out of my brain onto paper. And when I don't have something for the newsletter, I'll skim and be like, oh yeah, this has been coming up. I can do something on this. So that's my work process.
I do need a better place to put ideas. Like right now I have like 3 different locations, which is the kiss of death because like there's no reason to have 3 locations for anything. But I'm like the classic person who's like, I'm going to put this here and I'm going to remember that I put it there. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, I have no idea where the thing is. I will not remember. So I've actually thought about like indexing, like trying to do more thoughtful stuff, but I'm sort of waiting for like AI to fix my
technological solution
for me, but like I don't it might not happen. Well, we're almost out of time. Laura, what are you feeling grateful for this week?
I am really excited to take a road trip with my kids for Thanksgiving. We're doing a slightly different Thanksgiving. I'm not cooking. That's amazing. We're going out to eat for Thanksgiving and going to explore a city not too far from us. So it's a little bit different Thanksgiving, but I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to add too, actually, car trips are like, I figured out, I was driving home from a book manuscript workshop for my second academic book with my husband. And we spent just like an hour and a half, like between DC and like Pennsylvania, talking through like a possible metaphor for like, and it was amazing. It like, it like fixed the book in that like one. So like sometimes long car rides, like we talked about constraints, right? But like sometimes being locked in a box with another person, the only time I can get my 13-year-old to have like a sustained conversation is when we're in the car. I find out so much about her friends and like what's going on. And like, whereas if I'm talking to her like face to face, it's like, pulling teeth, you know?
Yeah.
So there is something nice about the constraints of like, you know, hurtling through space in a steel box that helps people connect ideas. So yeah, well, that's awesome.
And what's your thankful thing?
I am grateful that tomorrow I carved out time to do some, I don't have any meetings. I don't have any, like I can actually do some sustained thinking on stuff. We also got Hamilton tickets for
Nice.
like it's like the traveling one version. But they're coming to, or I guess they're in Rochester. So that's a surprise. The kids don't know. And they're obsessed. So we'll do Hamilton on Wednesday night. So that's really exciting. So I'm grateful for family, but also I'm in the dean's office and like we all just need a break from like, people. So it will be a really nice 5-ish, like 5-day weekend kind of thing. So yeah.
Good. Well, I think we should charge everybody to not just make progress on their ideas, but to also rest and do some nothing. Try not to doom scroll.
Yeah. And that's actually something too that like, I think I have a really hard time with, but sometimes just chopping onions and like not listening to a podcast, not trying to do anything, not trying to multitask. Like sometimes that frees your brain, not even to like generate ideas, but just to rest. Like it doesn't have to be inputting or outputting. It can just be. So maybe what you need this week is just to chop onions.
Yes. Listen to what your body is telling you.
Yes. Well, thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And Laura, have a wonderful road trip.
Thank you, Lauren. Have a great time at Hamilton.
Thank you. We will see you all next week. And everyone drive safe and eat good food and spend time with people you care about.
There you go.
Talk to y'all later. Bye.
You've been listening to We Made This Political with Laura Forcum and Lauren Hall. You can find us on Substack, Instagram, or LinkedIn. The podcast Substack is We Made This Political. Laura's Substack is How to Human, and Lauren's Substack is The Radical Moderate's Guide to Life. Subscribe and share if you like what you hear, and please also rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. That really, really helps other people find our work and means a lot to us too. Thanks for listening.